Amriteshwari Namaha. Good evening to one and all who have logged into this program and as part of the Sustainability and Beyond Colloquium series. And I'm indeed very honored and humbled to be able to speak at this forum with in the same ties as Dr. Prem, Dr. Srivalsan and Dr. Manisha. I just want to share some of my thoughts on disaster management and especially the importance of evaluating relief efforts that happens during any disaster. Just bear with me. I want to say that while I've worked a little bit on disaster relief research, my main focus here today is to share my thoughts on some of the practices that I have observed personally. As you all know, Dr. Prem has also mentioned about our Chancellor, Madam Dhanani Devi, being in the forefront of many of the disaster relief operations for the longest times. And I do seek inspiration from some of the actions that have been taken during these events. So in a moment, I'll just go through what I plan to cover: introduction to disaster. Just a very short, just to keep everybody in the same plane. Disaster management cycle, a response phase, a preparation phase, and what is a successful disaster relief effort, and problems with the disaster relief operations. And so I'll go into details whether why the disaster preparations is in more ways than one. Is affected by the evaluation of how well disaster relief is conducted. First, just to set a context, context. Go back to this. Yeah, what is a disaster? So the UN office, UNDRR have given a very nice, old, well accepted definition: a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or a society causing widespread human, material, and economic environmental losses which exceed the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. I like to stress on the word coping using its own resources because it brings into the picture an external force, external people who may not know the community, who may not understand the various various actors which is within their community. So that is very key, and that affects a lot of the disaster activities that happens. Now, if you were to look at what how disaster has when you look at when you say disaster, how bad can they be? Just look at some of the stats. I will not bore you with a lot of stats. You can Google it, and but just to give a scale of what's happening in the last 10 years, just in India, you see that 500 million people have been affected by disasters. 500 million in the last 10 years. This is only in India alone. Let's not look at in India it's almost 700 or 800 million. In China. So, and if you look at the rest of the world, so 500 million, and so it's a big amount, big number. And if you were to look at, break it down only into flood as one of the, well, you can debate whether it's natural or man-made, which is both. Again, it's about 100 million people in the last 10 years have been affected in India alone. So it's a large number. So, of course, the number of people dying is far less, but it's still a major disruption in people's lives, which requires a lot of effort to get people back to their normal life after that. There's this floods closer to home, just to remind those who have seen it in real life. This is a point of interest if you look at at an accepted form of a disaster management cycle. Next, this is a disaster management cycle, and this is the standard one. So we have mitigation, preparedness, the response, and recovery. And the shock to the system comes at the disaster, when the disaster strikes between the preparedness and then we respond. So this is a very standard thing. And while this is a circle which goes clockwise, my my observation has been that, the preparedness and response comes, there is a big uh, closed feedback loop between the two, and that affects how well uh, that people are, especially when you have uh, hazards which happen very quickly. Between the time between the hazards are so quick that you cannot wait for the whole for the whole group to recover, and then you look at mitigating factors. You just have to be very, very quick about the response, and so the quality of response has a very, very important part to play in the preparedness in the first place. So that's where I'm coming. That's what I'm heading to. I hope I can make that clear by the end of the presentation. And in the response phase, which is this green phase over there, the response phase. What is it that people do? The primary goal of this response phase is to save lives. Do search and rescue, provide basic amenities, protect property, and do evacuation. And so this is generally the expected role of any service provider, I would like to call it, in a response phase. However, who are these people who actually do this? And these are the first responders. We call them the first responders. So they can be the police officers, paramedics, firefighters, emergency medical technicians. This is an organized group. Then they have got the local population. They tend to be the first set of responders. Informal groups, they call them emergent groups, who come in, exist for that period when the disaster relief operation is done, and they disappear. And then non-profit organizations, non-government organizations who, as part of their charter, do help out in this in a way. And our organization, Madam is one prime example. Now, what are the activities that these first responders are expected, or rather they tend to be in? They tend to be in rescue. Of course, rescue is very, very important. Medical care, providing medical care, providing a shelter, immediate shelter for them, giving the people, those who are rescued, clean water and food, and of course, clothing. Okay. And but however, one thing is the expectations and needs. That is very, very different. That's a bit of a challenge. So now, what has happened is that the expectations and needs of these victims, I would like to call them the victims, seem to be a bit more than what the providers have been generally been doing. So there is also these things about relocation. That's actually, if you can call it, is part of the third phase of the thing. Taking care of the deceased. Many people are very worried about this is very cultural, about the people who have passed away during that disaster. Safety of the loved ones. So there have been issues with mental stress when they do not know where the child is, where their mother is, where their sister is. And of course, immediate counseling. So all of these things maybe are really expected from the victims. And I think and this is something that we have observed. And one of the prime examples that I have seen is actually during the tsunami at Amritapuri, where our Chancellor was very, very particular about making sure that family members were identified and they were put together so that the mental stress was taken care of, counseling was done, and and make sure, and all the other needs are also taken care of together with this. This made the rehabilitation phase much smoother, and while that happened. So taking care of that at that point in time itself was very important. So as a group, what do we need? So relief providers, they need to upskill themselves to be able to do all of this. And you can see that many of the groups that I've mentioned are really not geared for these things. So, skills, technical expertise, do they have tools, equipment? Do they have the personnel to do that? So do they have, what is the motivation of the person? Are they paid employees, or are they people doing it out of, love for mankind? Many of them have turned into, put aside their differences, during these disasters. And so there are temporary changes in them which will turn them into people who are very highly motivated. But how long can this motivation last? What about leadership? So that leadership is a big in a disaster management situation. The leadership, calm, visionary, with a lot of networks, with being able to get to get the resources that's required, deploy resources as and when required. The training, are they trained in these new methods, technology? There's recently, in the Kerala floods, we used the students in Amrita used a lot of technology to identify, triangulate needy the people who required help, and informed the people who are on the ground exactly where these people were and what they need. Trust to the community around where they're going to work, have the trust with this organization. And of course, do they have the other resources and the mobility to move around as and when required? So, keeping all of this in mind, you know that at the end of the disaster, it's a big issue. So, the one key question that we need to answer is, what is a successful relief effort in a disaster? How can one know if the relief activities and humanitarian efforts are really successful? Just managing, saving lives, is that a mode of success? Do they make a difference? Will this make the next round when a disaster strikes, will it make things easier? So how do you measure this performance? Because these are very important, because one of the things that I found out during my small little research that I've been doing, with problems with the present disaster relief operation, because it's a very competitive, unlike what many people may assume, due to the high profile nature of these reliefs, especially in the media, this intense competition between among the relief agencies. You can see many relief agencies putting up their signboard saying that we built this, we did that. And at the same time, there is poor coordination between the different relief operators who are working there. And instead of providing the fundamental basic needs, organizations just do what they do best. And that may not be what is required. And so, and of course, we've got many reports of false claims about success. And once one organization puts the work in doubt, there is the sense of mistrust that is created in the community for all other organizations. And many organizations will just tap their own backs and say what a great job they've been doing, but could they have done more? So these are the two things. So the expectations, what I found with the expectations from the community or the victims, and the service that has been provided by the community, by the service provider, there is still a lot of difference between the two. And I think there can be a lot can be done if we, in peacetime, find out how the previous disasters were taken and mitigate against these things happening again. So then this will help us do better preparation. Technology can help. I know, the WNA, Dr. Manisha's group is doing a lot of work in predicting and forecasting events, especially in landslides. Taking precautionary measures in response to warnings. This requires trust building. This requires understanding of the community, which is the next point. Understanding the community, its needs, as both as community, as an individual, and prepare plan based on those expectations. And then once the disaster strikes, there'll be a lot more response from the community itself to help themselves, improving response by organizing and strengthening capacity, to deliver timely and effective rescue. So in conclusion, I just want to show that, ensuring quality of response to disaster must always take priority over the pursuit to attain numerical targets. I think that's something that many organizations still do. An importance of using perception of the receivers of aid in disaster situation also is very important. That I used in my research. This is in addition just evaluating the work done by the responders. availability of verified data. Disaster, when disaster happens, it's very difficult for us to collect data. But again, in this modern age, there was, like as I had mentioned, technology has helped in the flood victims, where stranded areas where they could be identified. Understanding the community and its needs, and about all of this will feed into the next phase, which is rehabilitation. And that is a very key aspect of disaster relief, and then into risk mitigation in forward. That's all I have. Thank you very much. I hope I've contributed a little bit to some of you, if not many of you. Thank you for your attention, and I would like to say one quote from Amma. We cannot change the situation in life, but we can actually change our attitude towards them. And so if we, as I said, these are very, very important aspects. So disasters will come and go, whether they're natural or not, but how we act and during those periods is more important than preventing these disasters, which something that we may not be able to do too often. Thank you very much, and Om Amdeshwari Namaha.